There's a legend in the desolate town of Ravenwood, whispered only in candlelit corners, about a figure that comes in the dead of night. They call him the Grinning Man. When Henry Whitlock's younger sister, Alice, vanished from her bedroom one stormy night, her only trace was a single cracked mirror left on her bed. The mirror was odd too, for it bore an engraving at its edge, "He sees what you fear." Consumed by guilt and desperation, Henry vowed to uncover what had taken her. He ignored the whispers of the townsfolk about the Grinning Man. A demon of shadows, they said, who feeds on fear. Henry was not a believer in such tales, until the night he found the first letter. It was tucked under his pillow, a single sheet of brittle parchment written in crimson ink. It read, "Do you miss her smile? I do. Come find me where the shadows dance." The handwriting was unfamiliar, jagged as though the words had been carved onto the page rather than written. That night, Henry dreamed of a grotesque figure, a man impossibly tall and unnaturally thin, wearing a tattered black suit. His face was obscured by darkness save for a grin. A grin so wide and sharp, it seemed to split his face in two. When Henry awoke, the same cracked mirror from Alice's bed was now on his nightstand. The letters continued to appear, each more unsettling than the last. Her laughter echoes in the hollow spaces of your mind. Do you hear it? She called for you, Henry, but you didn't come. Soon, you'll be next. They led him to an abandoned house on the outskirts of Ravenwood. It had been condemned for decades, the windows shuttered, the walls sagging like the face of something ancient and tired. Inside, the air was damp, the stench of decay overwhelming. Mirrors adorned every wall, each cracked and stained. As Henry moved deeper, his flashlight flickered, casting distorted reflections of himself in the fractured glass. In the basement, he found her. Alice sat on the floor, her back to him, swaying gently. Her once golden hair was now streaked with gray, her small frame gaunt and frail. "Alice?" he whispered, his voice trembling. She turned to face him, and Henry staggered back. Her face was twisted into an inhuman grin. Her lips stretched so far back they tore at the corners. Her eyes were hollow pits, black as the void. Behind her, the shadows writhed and coalesced, forming the figure from his dreams. The Grinning Man stepped forward, his movements jerky, like a marionette pulled by unseen strings. His grin was impossibly wider now, his teeth jagged and yellow, and his voice was a rasping whisper that seemed to come from all directions. "You came, Henry," it said, "just as I knew you would. You fear failure, don't you? Failing to save her, failing to save yourself." Henry tried to scream, but no sound escaped. The Grinning Man leaned closer, his face mere inches away, and Henry saw the truth in his reflection. His own face now bore the same hideous grin. When the townsfolk found Henry's body days later, his face was frozen in a grotesque grin, his eyes empty sockets staring into nothing. The cracked mirror was clutched in his hand, and a single message was scrawled across the glass. "He sees what you fear, he knows who you are, and he is never done." The house in Ravenwood remains untouched, but sometimes late at night, those brave enough to pass by claim they hear laughter, a deep rasping chuckle that makes the air turn cold. They say, if you stare too long into a mirror, you might see him grinning back at you. And once you do, he'll never leave.